I'm Stephanie, and I love talking about houseplants, specifically in this video, Hoya. I'll be talking about all the things that I love about Hoya. This video was inspired by Harli G, one of the first YouTubers I ever started following when it comes to houseplants. I love her content, and she recently posted a video on things she doesn't like about Hoya, and I thoroughly enjoyed that video because she's speaking from a place of experience and knowledge, and she knows a lot about Hoya because she's had it for so long. I, however, have been bitten, like I said, since January. And so I am sort of like in that lavender haze when it comes to Hoya. I'm just smitten and I love all the things, and that's what I'm excited to talk about. If you haven't seen her video though, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's a great video. As usual, she puts out such great content. But she inspired me, and so I thought in my excitement I would share the things that I absolutely love about this genus that I have come to love for the past few months. So all my Hoya heads, unite. It's time for us to do a deep dive into what we love about Hoya. One of the first things I noticed about Hoya when I first started getting to know them, feeling one, touching one, seeing one in person for the first time, is how unique their leaves are. I've had quite a few houseplants, and if you've watched my older houseplant tour video, you know like what it's in my collection. And so I typically have a lot of big leafed plants, very softer, thinner leafed plants as well. Most of Hoya plants are thick and succulent, very juicy leaves. Shape and texture, I just love their leaves itself. And for a lot of them, they've got these very broad, very large leaves. Of course, not as big as a Monstera deliciosa or a fiddle fig. A lot of them have these very paddle-like leaves on them, and I just love that about them. The very toughness of the leaf. They do not rip easily. They're very sturdy, very hardy. I almost forgot after talking about foliage about some of the plants with pubescent leaves. So for example, this is a Hoya globulosa cow bang. I can never remember whether it's a dang or a bang. But anyways, the leaves have some hairs on the back, on the undersides, and they're quite soft. They're very pubescent. It feels like a blanket. It has the most beautiful pubescence. And then some plants, I'll show you a picture, their pubescence is on the top of the leaf and not on the underside. And they're so unique in that way. And also the veining on some of the leaves, I just like the crinkled sort of look to these leaves, the dark, deep veins, and it's so beautiful. The leaves are also so shiny, especially the newer leaves. And yeah, the foliage is gorgeous, and I spend a long time. I say you can because I'm assuming you do too. You can really linger and just take in the foliage. So since we're talking about leaves, I love the variegation that a lot of these Hoya have. So in my collection, I love Hoya, mainly variegated or splashy Hoya. So I'm in love with the splashing, whether it's a light green splashing like a Hoya Joy splash, or whether it's like a minty splashing like on Carnosa's Freckles splash. I just love just the uniqueness that each leaf can give. I'm a big variegation lover. And so I just love how you can just get so much unique variegation and splashing in Hoya and their leaves. I love that about them. I love the uniqueness of their leaves. Secondly, which is another thing, I've got my list in front of me here. So if you see me glancing down, I'm looking at my list. But secondly, in addition to their splashing and beautiful variegation, what I love about it, so this is sort of like a B part to my first one, is that when you have Hoya with the bright white variegation, for example, the Hushkiliana or the Carnosa, Crimson Queen, and Crimson Princess, the ones with that bright, stark variegation, they tend to last really long and the plant can hold on to that white variegation. If you compare it to a lot of other thinner leafed plants that have white variegation, for example, I have a Monstera Stanleyana albo, or even like the Monstera albos, a lot of time albo plants, the very bright white variegation sort of melts off the plants, and sort of sometimes you get this very unsightly looking melted off part to the leaf. But with Hoya, these bright parts tend to last. They tend to stay very long. I've watched plenty videos of people who have mentioned that for them, the white only leaves last a very long time. Some people have mentioned that theirs fell off, but the vast majority mentioned that theirs actually lasts for a really long time. And so that's what I love about it. I'm looking forward and I'm excited to mine getting that bright white variegation, and that knowing that the plant will be able to hang on and keep that leaf for a long time. They just feel like very sturdy plants. Like they don't feel overly delicate. A lot of them, some of them are delicate, but overall they just feel very, I don't know, I can't explain it. But anyways, that's number 2. That's what I love about Hoya. Number 3, another thing that I love about Hoya is their size. Sounds weird. Sounds like a very strange thing to say, but I love their size. The reason is because when I first started collecting houseplants, I had just moved into this space that I'm in. And this space is a lot bigger than the previous space that I was in. And so that was during COVID. We didn't have a lot of furniture. And the only stores that were really open in my city where I lived were plant stores. So like nurseries, garden centers were allowed to be open. So naturally I thought, well, I can't really get furniture right now. How about I just decorate my space with houseplants? So that's what happened. I started collecting and getting houseplants, but I started getting big houseplants. So that's how I ended up with my huge fiddle leaf fig, getting a Monstera deliciosa. Granted, they weren't big when I got them, but I knew that eventually they'll get big and take up a lot more space in my home. That way it will just help to fill in some of those awkward gaps in my home. So that's how I ended up with like many ficus plants. I have like a ficus tineki. If you've seen my big houseplants video, I'll put it here, or even just my plant tour video that I did, I think maybe 2-3 months ago, you'll see my big houseplants. So I have quite a few huge houseplants. And so I got to a point where those houseplants, now that they've matured and they are, you know, they're big and they're taking up space and they're awkward sometimes. So I started to struggle and I started to fall slowly out of love with my big houseplants because they were so commanding and they took up so much space. And so that's what made me sort of pivot into Hoya and fall in love with them, because with a lot of Hoya, they either trail or you can put them on a trellis. And I know that some Hoya can get pretty lush and big and full. They could get full. That's the word I'm looking for. But they're not big and they do not take up as much space as like a Monstera or a ficus would. And so that's what I love about them. I love that you can in a similar space, like the space that a Monstera would take up, you could have multiple Hoya plants in the space that one big plant would occupy. So I love that. I used to be that person who was annoyed by tiny plants, and I was like, oh, why would I want so many tiny little itty bitty plants for me to water? But like the big plants just got to a point where they don't need as much care, and I need more plants to take care of. I need more babies. And so Hoya sort of filled in that, where I could sort of give individual plants care, and I'm able to accumulate more of them and get little bits of joy and excitement from many small little plants versus just my big plant that takes up a lot of space and then it's pushed out a new leaf and that's it. You know, I love that they're small because they occupy less space and you can have more of them. That's what I love. Another thing that I love about Hoya in connection to them being small is that they need to be repotted less frequently. Hoya actually prefer to be left alone. They love being root bound. They love feeling snug and feeling safe in their time, in their space, and that actually helps them to push out more growth. It helps them to flower, and so my point is they require less repotting than bigger plants do. So for example, I have a Monstera Thai constellation, and I got it maybe 6 months ago, maybe a little bit more than that, maybe more than that. And since I've gotten that plant, I've had to repot it at least 3 times. And I was looking at it this morning, and it needs to be repotted again. But with Hoya, it's not like that. Like they're happier to be root bound. Like I had a Hoya that was terribly root bound. Like the roots were circling in the bottom of this tiny little cup. And then when I repotted it, I thought I was doing it a favor. It dropped 2 leaves because it was like, you should have left me where I was. It was happy, more than happy to be like root bound in that pot. Like I've said this before, like in my Hoya beginners video, that when you get a new Hoya, leave it, just leave it. Maybe you want to isolate it a little bit to check for pests, but don't repot as soon as you get it because it slows them down. And so my point is, it's sort of a little bit less work for you because you don't have to repot them as often. So you don't have to be buying new pots and like, like I need a pot for this. Oh my goodness, like find that work, that space, that mess of repotting. It's less necessary with Hoya because they don't need to be repotted as often. So that's another thing. I don't know what number I'm at right now, but I'm just going to keep listing them. I'll count them as I edit the video. Another thing that I love about Hoya is that they are resilient. I love how resilient they are, especially like anything that's like Carnosa related. Any Hoya that is plain green, that has no variegation, very resilient. And then when you get into the ones with splashing, they're a bit more resilient. They're more resilient, not as resilient as the plain green Hoya. And then when you go in like to the variegated Hoya, like that's when they, maybe they become a little bit more tricky, like the Hushkiliana. But overall, I find that Hoya they're actually quite resilient. They can withstand mistakes. I've made lots of mistakes with my Hoya, especially my Carnosas. I've messed them up so much. And it takes a lot for them to drop a leaf, in my opinion. I have other plants that drop leaves very easily, but with the majority of my Hoya, again, not every single Hoya is like this, but with the majority of them, they take a while before they drop leaves. If they drop a leaf, that means like I have really messed up. I have crossed the line. I've gone way too far. But I've noticed they take a long time before they get pushed to that point. And what they will do is they'll just sort of, that will tie into another point that I'm going to mention later. But my point is they are quite resilient. The majority of the common ones are like that. When you get into like uncommon rare ones, they're sort of a bit more delicate. But for the most part, that I find that's how Hoya are. And another point tied into resilience is neglect. They can withstand a lot of neglect. For some, that may be not a good thing because then they tend to forget about the plant, and so then it sort of backfires a little bit. But for me, a plant that I can neglect is a great thing for me. I am a very busy person, and I don't want a plant that needs me to sort of every few days I need to check on it. Oh my goodness, are you okay? Are you okay? I don't want to have many plants like that. I don't mind having 1 or 2 plants that are like that, just a few of them, just to, check on them, peek in on them. I don't mind, but to have an entire genus or multiple plants of a specific genus that all need to be like, yeah, no, that's just way too much work. And so what I love about Hoya is that they can withstand that neglect. If you didn't get to it to water it in time, it's not going to overreact like a different plant would. So for example, what's a plant of mine? I try not to keep difficult plants in my collection. Some plants, if you allow them to dry out, they are going to react. They're going to let you know, no, thank you, you have gone too far. Or they have some plants, if you let them sit in water for a bit too long, they will react. They will show you, like alocasia is definitely like that. They're sensitive to change. And so Hoya is not like that. If you forgot to water it, or if I had mine sitting in water for a little bit too long, it's fine. Like it bounces back again with the resilience, but they can withstand being forgotten for a little while. And sometimes they'll even flower off of the neglect. Sometimes they'll even perform better off the neglect. You know, they can tolerate that, right? How's the video going so far? Like what you see? If you do, let me know by giving me a thumbs up down below, and consider subscribing. I have a feeling you may like some of the other videos on my channel. Okay, let's keep going. And so because they can live off of that neglect, it takes me to my next point, in that they're low maintenance. It ties into neglect and being resilient, but they're low maintenance, especially if you've put them in a self-watering pot. Because for me, so I'm saying this from my experience, for me, I have never had mealybugs or root mealies, like an infestation. So because of that, I find my Hoya, most of them, to be low maintenance. I don't need to like frequently clean their leaves like I would for my fiddle leaf fig. Like they don't get spider mites as easily as the rest of the plants in my collection. They're good, they're cool with most of them with whatever fertilizer I use. For example, I wouldn't regard an alocasia as low maintenance. Like I need to check my alocasia all the time to make sure that it's fine, and make sure that water level is not too high or not too low. You know, like I don't have a lot of high maintenance plants, but you know, I find most of my Hoya are pretty chill. Another thing is that they are slow growing, and you may wonder, what? How is that a good thing? Sometimes slow growing can be a good thing. I don't like plants that do nothing for a very long time. Granted, Hoya can do that. Hoya can be like that. Yes, it can. But typically, a lot of times it means that, in my experience, it means that maybe you need to check on something. Maybe it's not happy about something. But for the most part, when I say they're slow growing, they're not as fast growing as, for example, my Monstera, or even, what's a plant that I could mention? Even like a Syngonium, it's not as fast as those plants, or even as a pothos. And in a way, that can be a good thing depending on how much space you have in your plant collection. So if you don't have a whole lot of space, then it's being slow growing can be a good thing. Because honestly, I have had videos where I'm like, this plant is too slow growing. But I do also feel with some plants like, this plant is too fast growing. And so I've had both of those reactions before. Especially when your collection is big, fast growing is sometimes not what I'm looking for. And so I can appreciate that Hoya, it takes a little time for that, like, you know, that branch to come out, and for that leaf to get it to its full size. It takes time. It doesn't quite grow as quickly as like maybe a philodendron, right? And so because of that, philodendron can quickly outgrow their spaces. But Hoya, even if they are small and they don't grow as quickly, it takes time for them to fill out the space that they're given. And so that can be a good thing. So you're not constantly trying to find a new home for it. It can live in its existing home for a lot longer than a Monstera. You know, a Monstera could outgrow that space very fast, if that makes any sense, right? So this is where the slow growing, again, it can be annoying, but it can be a pro, right? Another thing that a lot of people love about Hoya, and I can appreciate, it's not why I buy them, but that's something I think that's a pro in that, is that Hoyas bloom and they have flowers. Again, just to be realistic, the con of that is a lot of those flowers will drop sap, and then the petals will fall, and then it sort of makes a mess. And some of them can smell. And again, I'm being realistic here. I think it's awesome that this plant can bloom and flower. Funny enough, I'm not a fan of flowering plants. Isn't that funny? Like, for example, the African violet, and they make these cute little flowers. that's very nice, but I'm not a fan of that. For some reason, like, having a plant for the sake of flowers is not something that I'm in love with. I love flowers on their own, but I don't know, I'm just not in love with flowering plants. And Hoya, I don't get them because they can flower, but it's nice that they can flower because their blooms have a scent to it. Okay, yes, a con. Some of them smell terrible. Okay, you could cut it off. Okay, but a lot of them have the most beautiful scent. I've never smelled one. I only had one Hoya that ever had a flower. I bought it and it came with the flower. And at that time, I guess the peak of the scent had already faded. And so I missed that. But I trust other people out there who say that Hoya have the most beautiful scent. And I'm looking forward to eventually my Hoya doing the same thing. My Hoya, like, having a beautiful, sweet, candy-like scent in my bedroom. Like, I think that's exciting. And I like having the additional goal of helping it to flower. The excitement of, oh my goodness, it might flower. Even if that is not why I got it, but it's nice to know that I can get excited over a peduncle, over it doing something instead of just putting out new leaves, you know? But funny enough, like, African violets don't excite me for some weird reason. Like, all other flowering plants don't, you know, they don't excite me. But for some reason with Hoya, like, it just, I don't know, it excites me. And so that's something I love about them, that there's the possibility that they can do that. So another thing that I love about Hoya is that they branch very easily. I think this will be my last point, is that they branch very easily. And you may think, well, how is that like a big deal? I love that. I love that. So with most of my other plants, like most of my plants, for them to branch out, for them to sort of, so we have the main growth, the branch or the main vine or anything, the main growth point, whether it's a branch or a vine, with most plants, you need to cut it to encourage the branching off, not with Hoya. And with most plants, if a leaf, so let's say you lost a leaf, no branch will come out from there. It'll just continue to grow up and you'll have that area will remain bare. However, with Hoya, it's not like that. So with a lot of my Hoya, especially the crassipetiolata, that Hoya, where I have lost a leaf, the plant itself will push out a new vine or new growth. A lot of Hoya do that. And I love that, because one of my pet peeves with houseplants is a bare vine or a bare branch or a bare stem where the leaves fell off and it's just empty. That's like, no. I honestly don't like that at all. And I love that Hoya will, on its own, without me cutting that vine, I don't have to lose the progress of all the efforts it's made thus far. I love that the plant will itself, on its own, initiate that branching. And I love that. So it gives me a lot more joy than just looking at the end of the newest leaf. Instead of just looking at the end of that vine, I can look all along the vine for exciting new growth that will come. So for example, my Hoya Silver Dollar is another example, and it just did nothing. So it pushes out the vine and it stopped and it stopped growing. So no more new growth from the end of the vine. And then it started pushing out leaves along the vine, which is what Hoya do. But then there was an area on the vine where I don't know how, but like a leaf fell off. I don't know if it was physical damage or shock or something, but the leaf fell off. And the plant on its own started pushing a new vine. I'm beyond excited. I'm so excited at this. If you follow me on Instagram, you already know this because I posted it. And that's so thrilling to me that so I don't have to cut it. I don't have to cut it and then repropagate what I cut and then start all over that way. I love that the plant will on its own fill itself out and do what I need it to do. And that's it for today's video. I know I talked a lot in this, but I am quite excited about Hoya. Maybe in a few years, I'll be singing the same tune as Harli. But for now, these are all the things that I love about Hoya and that makes me so excited to come look at my plants every day. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you love Hoya, you may like these other videos here. And you can easily subscribe to my channel by clicking right here. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.